let's do it.
Just a moment. All right, welcome. So today I'm excited to have Deniz on how I work at DAO. So Deniz is a DUX core facilitator at MakerDAO. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Kei, for the invite. I'm really excited for this talk. Looking forward.
Sure. Let's get it. So before we dive into, can you tell us, a little bit about yourself, and also how you fall down the space of DAOs and became working at MakerDAO?
Yeah, that's, I think, the best first question you can ask. So
right.
I'll share my story. So I've been in crypto since early 2017. I got really lucky because a friend of mine, he basically, at one point he just made me grab my attention, and I started looking into it. And basically ever since I discovered it, my first major touch point was reading the Ethereum white paper, and then also doing an investment. And then, I went down the rabbit hole, so to say. So pretty much immediately I started engaging with the local community. I'm based in Amsterdam, and we had a really good meetup community back then. So I just went to 3-4 meetups every week and met a lot of people, and we're just nerding about blockchain technology and its use cases, right? And in that same period, I was lucky enough to meet some young people like myself. They just founded a company. They were doing enterprise blockchain consulting and development, and that's actually where I started my job in the space, right, in the blockchain space, and still very grateful. That was really the start of my career. I've been there for about 2.5, 3 years, and it was an amazing time. Learned a lot. But over time, I really got more and more fascinated about DeFi, which is this. I think it's the most exciting sector when it comes to crypto and Web3. And at one point, I had this opportunity to make the switch to an early stage DeFi startup that was just in the DeFi summer of 2020. So that was amazing timing. Yeah, that was
Didn't
insane.
Know
that was a very interesting time. I learned a lot, and a lot happened, of course. It ended up not working very well. So I ended up after about 5-6 months, I ended up leaving that company. And since then I've been just doing a lot of soul searching and trying to figure out how to get back into the space. And quite recently I got the opportunity to contribute to MakerDAO. So I started them. I started contributing in August last year, and things have been very well. So it has been very interesting for me to really work in a DAO and also make it work for myself. And my main role there is I'm a product manager. So I'm the product manager of the DUX team, the DUX team. And we basically are responsible for the governance UX and the governance tooling of the Maker protocol. So we built the governance portal, and we try to improve it a lot and integrate it with other tools. And recently I got the opportunity to become the core unit facilitator, which is kind of the team lead. And I'm just very happy, and I'm very fascinated by this whole space. And it's kind of this new fascination that has been grown inside of me besides DeFi, and it's actually very complementary. So I'm very excited to be part of this.
Interesting, super interesting, and also I don't know where to start questioning about that, but so let's ask about you mentioned you did a startup, DeFi startup in 2020, right? Well, what was the project? What the project is about, and also I would like to ask about what was the reason why you started contributing to MakerDAO. I mean, there's a bunch of opportunities, right? But I think, pick up MakerDAO to focus on. So I wanted to ask, what was the reason there? And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so to tell a bit more about the DeFi startup I worked for in 2020, it was called the Opium Protocol. And Opium is kind of an on-chain derivatives protocol built on Ethereum mainnet. I was very impressed by like their vision, and also like I had a really high I was really bullish on their CTO, and also like the whole design of the protocol. And I was just really eager to start contributing to that project. It was quite early stage, right? So they were still very much building the technology. There was not really a community yet. There was no token yet, and they were doing like a funding round. So it was kind of like this roller coaster where we tried to get the project off the ground. And also like the DeFi space was like incredibly hot back then, and it also it moved like very fast. Like every few days things were like moving around, and you also, as a project, you had to revise your strategy. It was very intense. And I think the reason why I ended up leaving is not so much related to DeFi or to the product, but more like it didn't really work out. We weren't really able to get like a good working dynamic going. And I guess when I started, basically after that time, I started like researching my options and trying to figure out what to do next. And I had a couple of conversations. I actually also I also was in touch with Index Scoops, or the project you mentioned when we were talking earlier. Yeah. I'm actually very, very bullish on that project, and I think it's incredible what's happening. Absolutely, yeah. I think the reason I went for MakerDAO is I got the opportunity because I have like someone in my network. I had a catch up with him, and he mentioned that they were looking for people, and Maker was pretty much the very first DeFi product I started using myself. Like I really became like a power user in 2019. And it also was the first product that like myself as a user really made things click. It really made me realize the potential of DeFi, and the fact that DeFi was really like the first product market fit of crypto technology from my perspective. And I really had this feeling that Maker really has this strong long-term vision. It's been around for a long time. It hasn't had like catastrophic exploits or stuff like that. And I just felt like compared to these newer DeFi protocols and crypto projects that are always like very volatile and kind of chasing the market, and you don't really know where it's going to end up.
Right.
I felt like Maker has built out like this positioning in the space. And it's really like this long-term project where you're going to work with long-term people, and it's a bit easier to focus on building out something complex versus trying to figure out where the market is going and planning the next step. So I think that's the reason why I ended up going for Maker.
Gotcha. And one more thing. So I really want to dig into how you work at DAOs, but before that, I'm super bullish in. I was super amazed by the DUX team itself. So I want to I want to talk a little bit about that too. So what I was surprised was like because like if you look at the development in UX team in like an ordinary company, it's like they are like how to say fixing the UX of the product or website or like something like that kind of stuff, right? But for DX team, like you guys are focusing on governance UX, like governance UI, and like how you guys can make it like seamless for governance participants, right? Like I thought like that idea was like pretty amazing, and also like I have no like if you look at Index Scope team, like we do have a governance team, but there's no team like specialized like specifically doing UX for governance. So we'd love to hear what you're doing there, and also like a little bit about like how we started.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring it up, because it is kind of different to how it works at other DAOs, right? I mean, we have
I think so.
in crypto we have a couple of tools that we can use for voting. Like we have things like Snapshot, we have Tally, and this is actually what most of the protocols use. I think the let's say the policy, or like the principle that Maker adheres to, is that it doesn't want to rely on third parties to maintain like very critical infrastructure. And I think when it comes to things like voting, you don't want that to be like in the third party hands, especially when you're So that's I think kind of the reason why why we exist in the first place, right? I mean, the governance processes, but also the governance tooling of the Maker protocol is quite bespoke, right? So it's really built for the Maker protocol. It's not really general purpose. And our team is quite new. Like our team is actually like officially a core unit ever since a few months. And our initial focus is really the governance portal, which is like this main voting tool that is used for MakerDAO governance. But I think our larger mission is not only like maintaining that piece of infrastructure. It's really figuring out how can we make it easier and more attractive for people to participate in governance, because I think there's a lot to win there. If you look at MakerDAO, I think the quality of the discourse of the conversation that is happening is really high compared to other DAOs.
It's super high, and the percentages of participation is super high too. I was super amazed that too.
Yeah, that's actually the thing that I'm not very happy with currently. So we do have a quite a healthy set of delegates. So people that are really let's say they're here pretty much full time looking at and thinking about the DAO and voting, and then people can delegate their voting power to these delegates. But the actual number of unique participants that we have in governance, so people that are actually voting, is relatively low, and that's something I would really like to improve. So we're doing a bunch of things as a team to try and improve that. So we're building, of course, and improving this voting tool, but we're also doing research in how can we increase the governance participation rate, right? We are also talking with people from outside of the crypto space to learn more about that. And we're also doing a lot of research on how can we actually, for example, make it cheaper to vote? How can we make it more fun to vote? And how can we just make it easier for people to keep track of what's happening in MakerDAO and not spend too much time? So there's a lot to be done on our side, but I think we're on the right track.
I think so. And I want to hear your opinion about my idea. So I think one of the most one of the problem that we see why there's so many that DAO is struggling with the low participation of governance is there's no incentive to do it if you're really into a product or the service, right? So but what I was surprised when I was talking with Nadia from Maker, she was saying when she is thinking about hiring people, she doesn't look at the academic background or which company they worked for before, but she said she's really looking at the forum, what kind of discussion they posted, or what project, what proposal did they voted for. Those kind of activity is really crucial, and she said that's the thing that I find it value. So if if we can aggregate all the voting activity data to make it to someone's credential as a DAO worker, I think that'll be pretty useful for us, isn't it? What do you think?
I think that's an awesome idea. Absolutely. I actually I think what really helped me in my journey to become a contributor in this space is my on-chain history, right? I mean, if you just go back throughout the years, there's a couple of things I did which are kind of cool, and it really signals that what the space is about. And I really think that what you just mentioned, right, the kind of making governance participation tangible on chain and allowing people to also build up a track record. I think that's a really cool one, and I kind of regard it as it's kind of gamifying governance participation as well. And it is something we have been talking about. We aren't really actively looking into it yet, but I do think that could be an interesting, let's say, mechanism to create an incentive, because that's, I think, one of the very powerful things about Web3, about crypto, is that we can engineer these incentives from scratch, and they actually work. even myself, like if I don't know, if there's a way to earn like a POAP, right? Like these NFTs to participate in a governance call or in a governance vote, then I would be more inclined to do so, because it's just cool to collect them, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And like, I'm really looking forward to, like see the movement of like Maker. Because like, you guys always, make the first, how do I say, like, you guys are first mover. Like, there's so many, impressive, like, insight in the forum of Maker. So yeah, we'll love to dig into all that. But let me go back to what you're doing. And also like audience, probably like an audience would like to know what exactly DAO is like. We know like piece of the idea what DAO is, but like we don't know like what people doing inside of it. So like, can you tell us like what is your typical day look like from when you wake up and till going to the bed?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me think. I think it's a very good question. I want to answer it properly, because this is what it's all about, this question, right? Okay, I think the way I'm gonna answer it is, first I'm gonna talk a bit about what DAOs are, and also how that, let's say, the notion of a DAO has changed over time, right? Because when I got into crypto, when I got really interested in it, it was like early 2017. The concept of a DAO was also around, and then it was really, I don't know, it was a bit more true to the actual name of a DAO, right? A DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And I think back then, if you were talking about a DAO, you were talking about like this service company running on smart contracts, right? So we would be talking about ideas like decentralized Uber or something like that. And I was actually kind of fascinated by those ideas. And I actually wrote like a series of blog posts about these futuristic use cases. And I think what happened over the years, I'm kind of glad it happened, that we kind of left this 2017 ICO mind space, and we went closer to the essence of DAOs, which I think is human coordination. What I think has really changed or really kickstarted, let's say, this DAO frontier, right, is the pandemic, because I think the pandemic really forced a very big part of the workforce into this kind of remote working structure.
Absolutely.
And it also accelerated the development of these digital tools, right? So for example, we had things like Skype and FaceTime, but we didn't have things like Zoom and Google Meet. Like, things really improved ever since this happened. And I think this global shock event kind of made us realize that we can actually be productive when remote, right? And we can actually have like this very lean way of working. So for me, if you ask me what is a DAO, I think it's like this new vehicle for human coordination. And I think it's very modular. So it's kind of you take the, let's say, your understanding of a regular company, right? A company is like the structure where people can collaborate with processes, right? That's like what a company is. And I think a DAO is basically taking this concept of a company and stripping it completely. You're taking away all of this overhead, all of these complexities, and you basically try to start with the very essence, with the very lean setup, which is just a bunch of digital tools, so that you can talk with people, you can share files, and you can like exchange value and handle payments and stuff. And I think you can then, based on the mission of the DAO, based on what you want to do with this group of people, you can add things like processes, you can add tools, you can add complexity. And I think because of the fact that it's so modular, it's actually easier to make it work for a human being, because a human being is like a very organic, natural thing. Everyone has like their own, their own strengths and weaknesses and their own ways of working. And I think a DAO naturally is easier to fit onto a human, so to say, compared to like a traditional 9-to-5 with everything that's attached to it, right? So it's really interesting, and it's like it matches the zeitgeist incredibly well. And I think that's the reason why DAOs are so popular these days.
That is, yeah, I've never heard of that kind of explanation about DAOs, but that's true. I mean, there's various type of DAOs and people cannot understand what DAO is, but I think, as you mentioned, like that's the beauty of DAOs, right? Like we can tailor, like, we can make, DAOs to tailor it to any specific type of coordination, so to say, because it's so modular, and that's the strongest part. Is it like fair way to summarize your opinion?
Yeah, that's, I think, exactly it. And I think what the benefits of this new way of organizing human collaboration is, I think, of course, it's going to be way leaner, so it's going to be more cost efficient, but not only in cost. I mean, you just save so much time if you strip away all of these things, right? We don't no longer have things like commuting and all of this overhead, which just takes up so much of your time and your energy and also your happiness, I think. So it's just, I don't know, it's just a very efficient and also a very effective way of organizing people to build complex things and achieve complex things. And it really fits this digital age, post-pandemic age really well, I think.
Yeah, like that's true. I mean, I'm glad that you come up with the idea of like remote work first, because like I feel like DAO is the, how do I say, how do I say, like it's kind of like it has the idea of like a remote work but more distributed, like, because for the first place of like a remote work in in the pandemic, it was like distributed inside of the US, right? Like but if you look at DAO, it's like if you look at index scope, like if you join the weekly call, like people are like from like all over the world, like US, London, like in Africa and Japan, like Malaysia, and that is true. Like, and like it's totally fine. Like yeah, we do the job, like more, no, I can't say seamlessly, because it's, to be honest, it's not efficient as much. Like I mean, it's because baby face, but yeah, that is true. So so before going back to the daily daily life of DAO worker, I would like to ask Adam to like ask you this question. So have you had an experience of like working at a traditional company before dive into Web3 space? So like,
Yeah, absolutely.
so like my question is like how do you see the difference like from, I mean, looking back to the experience of like working at traditional company, like what is the difference like in can you explain and can you give us some like specific example, like why it's so different and why it's so exciting?
It's a really good question, and it's also one that made me if I just compare myself, like the way I feel and the way I work compared to like 1 or 2 years ago, it's a huge difference. Obviously, I'm way more happy right now. That's like the most important thing. So yeah, I'll explain. I think I was kind of triggered by what you mentioned earlier, right? So when the pandemic just started, people were also working remotely, but it was like more within a country or within a company. I was actually working at that startup I mentioned, right? So this enterprise blockchain design and development company, and I was actually leading a team there, and it was kind of crazy because suddenly like there was a lot of panic. This thing happened, and like together with the founders, we had to figure out, okay, how are we gonna keep the boat from not sinking, basically, right? How are we going to keep the operations running? And I think that the initial tendency of our company, but I think for many companies, was to just be very on top of everything. So we were doing so many calls, like every single morning at like 9 a.m. I was doing a call with my team, making sure that everyone was there and feeling good and there weren't like weird things. And I was just on the phone the whole day. And I think slowly we moved away from this, and there was more trust, I think, in basically people can be productive without being watched or being on the phone the whole time, right? And I think that's I think trust is like a very important component there, because if I consider like the way it works at a DAO, you're usually not in the same time zones, and you don't have this explicit hierarchy, right? Which means that there's no longer it no longer makes sense to do like these calls and try to really watch each other and see if you're actually working. So there's a higher degree of trust, and I think that is such an important thing for human, for productivity, but also for happiness, because this is something I've never experienced before. I was actually used to being in like this very strict cadence where you arrive at 9 to 5. Yeah, 9 to 5. That's how I've been living my life ever since before moving into DAOs, and that was kind of like the norm, right? But I've come to realize, especially as I started growing more comfortable with not being in a 9 to 5, that you can actually be way more productive in way less time if you're if you can figure out how you work as a person, right? Like how can you be productive, and what should I do to get into that like deep work state, and that does not involve being in a phone call at 9 a.m. and like being in an office until 5. It's way more fluid. So that's I think that's the very most important difference, like comparing like a traditional 9 to 5 job with working for a DAO, is that it's no longer possible to be in this super strict 9 to 5 cadence and everything that comes with it. So you're really challenged to figure out how can I be productive as a person. And I think usually that will end up in a very in a more flexible, but also just more relaxed way of living and way of working, where you're still going to be able to contribute a lot of value.
Interesting. So as you mentioned, like, if you look at, DAOs, like it's going to be more flexible, and like, it does, like, you don't have to like do a 9 to 5 kind of job, right? But is it because of the how do I say, the structure of DAOs? I mean, because like, if you look at, other, remote work company, like maybe, they're not doing 9 to 5 kind of job, right? It's more flexible. Is there any like how to say, special mechanism inside of the DAO that makes people work more flexible? Like, yeah.
It's a good question. I think you have a good point, in the sense that what I just mentioned is more related to remote work and cross, like international remote work, right? So I think you're absolutely right there. I think one added thing about DAOs, like very specifically, that makes this dynamic even stronger, is the fact that there's usually not this very explicit power structure, right? This hierarchy. So I think if you work in a DAO, if you contribute to a DAO in either as like a full-time contributor, or maybe as like a, I don't know, like a one-off contributor, you don't have like a job, and you don't have like a manager who's constantly watching your ass, making sure that you put in enough hours. It's more like it's kind of, you submit to or you kind of commit to a certain mandate or a certain project, and as long as you do that, you're going to be fine, right? So your main challenge is to deliver the work that you're committed to, or make sure that your domain is done well. But the way that you achieve this is it's basically up to you, right? And that's something, for example, the Dux team, we are with 6. We are with 4 engineers, 1 designer, and then me as the product manager. And we have like a very explicit mandate. So we have this topic that we need to take care of and that we need to take ownership of. But the way that we do this, and the way we organize ourselves, and the way we organize also our working days, is completely up to us, basically. And that's, I think, the beauty of something like a DAO, because I think for a lot of people that opens up this discussion of what's a healthy work-life balance, and also how can I maximize productivity without compromising on my happiness, right? And the other ambitions in my life.
Interesting. I got your, I got you, man. Like, it's not about like, 9 to 5 job, but it's about like, it's not hierarchy structure in the DAO so that people can, work fluidly as they want. And also like they don't have to feel pressure like from the managers or boss kind of thing, right? So that's what you're referring to. Interesting.
Yeah.
And like
I think maybe one thing I would add to that as I'm thinking about it, I think this only works if you're in a high trust environment, so to say. So if you're in a
I think so.
in an environment where you work with people that are very passionate or very interested about what you're doing, and if you have like this enormous company, like there's a lot of companies where thousands or tens of thousands of people are working, they're not really committed, and they don't want to work.
Right.
They just want to earn their money
Right.
and leave, right? I think for people like that, it's not going to work, because you really need this I don't know, this, it needs to come from the inside, like your motivation. And as long as you have that, as long as you find some people that all have this like inherent motivation to work on something, then I think it's possible to achieve this.
I totally agree with that. And also like, I think that's the beauty of MakerDAO. Like I talked to Nadia and then she mentioned exactly the same thing. Like team is the most essential thing, right? And like, the, like, as you mentioned, like, motivation comes from inside. Like, I totally feel like, because like, if you look at other DAOs, it's absolutely hierarchy structure. So like, I don't see the difference, right? But for, MakerDAO, because of the quality of contributors, like it can be like, it can be like in a more flexible way, and like, and how do I say, contribute, like contribute each other to build more great product. That's super exciting. All right, let's move on to your daily life as DAO worker. So what's your day look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me think. I'm trying to build like an overall picture of what my typical working day looks like. So I'm not a very early riser, so I don't wake up at 7 a.m.
Okay.
I usually wake up around like 8:30 or 9 or something like that. And I've really learned about myself these past, especially this past year actually, is that I need to have my morning ritual. I really have like a morning ritual. And if I skip that, I'm gonna have a shit day. I'm gonna feel bad, but I'm also not gonna be productive. So I've learned that I need to stick to this morning ritual, which usually like involves, of course, like showering and stuff, but also making coffee, like grinding my own coffee beans, making breakfast. Like I make my own granola and stuff. I have this really well-defined morning ritual, right? And when I'm having my breakfast and coffee, I just read a lot. So I usually read, I don't know, I'm reading up on what's happening on Discord within the community. I'm also reading a couple of news sources, and I'm just on Twitter a lot, right? And at one point, this usually takes like, I don't know, like 2 hours or so, 1.5, 2 hours. And then at one point you're fully up to speed. You have some food in your body, you're well rested, you have some coffee, and then you're like, you're there, you're ready for it. And then if I start working, because I usually prepare like a to-do list in the night before, but when I'm at that moment, I can like be super focused for 2 to 3 hours and get a lot of work done. That's actually where I deliver the most of the value, just in those 2-3 hours. And I'm not disturbed by let's say a schedule full of calls and team meetings and stuff. In the mornings, everyone is free to just work on the stuff that he wants to. So that's how I usually start my day. And usually after like 2 or 3 hours of deep work, I'm really exhausted, like mentally. I really need to take a break. And I can recall like a year ago, for example, I really had a hard time taking a break because it felt like you were cheating. You're not allowed to just leave the office, for example, and go out for 2 hours. So I've really been, it really took me a long time to break out of all of these norms, right? And these weird rules that were born into, so to say. But yeah, so what I usually do after those 3 hours, I just leave. So I usually leave the house for like 2-3 hours. I go for some indoor rock climbing with some friends, for example. I take a walk, and then when I get back, I have another 2 hours where I'm productive. Usually at my time, 5 p.m. We have like a stand-up call with the team, which usually takes like 30 minutes or so. We're in touch like throughout the whole day on Discord, so we have a lot of communication, but it's all asynchronous, right? So we're not doing a lot of calls. We're just using Discord, and people can reply whenever they want to. Sometimes we have like these more generic MakerDAO calls. For example, on Thursday we have governance and risk call, which is like this call every week where the whole community comes together and discuss a certain topic. And then usually in the evening, after having made some dinner, I'm not exhausted at all. Like I can recall when I was still working for a traditional company. In the evenings, I was completely spent. Like your mind is just done, right?
Right.
But if you structure your day the way I just mentioned, like I still have a lot of energy and a lot of brain power left.
Nice.
So I end up doing a lot of I'm still quite creative in the evenings, and yeah, when I'm, for example, right now here it's winter, so I tend to be behind my laptop a lot. So yeah, I just do some work here and there, but also try to get some other projects done. And yeah, so I think the most important let's say aspects about my working day, and I think the reason why it works really well is really I'm feeling really free to explore my productivity, right? And the way I can be productive. And I've kind of unlocked this structure where I have my morning ritual, and then when I've taken the time for that, then I can be really productive and then go out again. I don't know, it's kind of like this wave pattern that works really well for me. But it's funny because, for example, some colleagues of mine, they have kids, for example, they wake up very early and they're productive very early when I'm still sleeping. And then probably in the afternoon they're gone for a couple of hours, like I don't know, doing some chores or doing some other things. And so it's really a personal thing, and it's also a really personal process to figure out what your ideal working day looks like. But I think when you're contributing to a DAO as opposed to working in a 9 to 5, you actually have the opportunity and the freedom to explore this freely, and you're going to end up as a way more relaxed, happy, but also a way more productive and useful human being.
Interesting. Like, yeah, it's really, how do I say, you have like own routine to how do I say, to maximize your productivity, not only as DAO worker, but as just yourself, and it's super nice. I mean, I seriously have to learn from that. But I was curious about because like we have like only a few minutes left, so oh man, what should I ask for? So
I know.
So for the I really have to dig into more of it, but let me ask you last few questions. So the first one is so we've talked a lot about the positive side of working as to be full-time worker in DAOs, right? At DAOs. So so can you give us what are the challenges to be a full-time DAO worker?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things I would say. I think the first one that's really important to realize for people that are like interested in working for a DAO is that right now it's still quite risky to work for a DAO, right? You have pretty much zero job security. There's a lot of risk when it comes to how you're getting paid. For example, if you want to get a mortgage for a house at one point, you're gonna probably struggle to use that income to get like a loan, right? There's all of these practical things because we're so early and there's not really regulation and all these kind of structures for it that make it quite risky. But yeah, if you're convinced about this space, and if you're young and you can take a bit more risk, then I think that's something you can consider. I think for me right now, if you ask me personally, the main downside of working in the DAO, I think, is the lack of, let's say, standards or norms when it comes to certain things. Like, I don't know, it can be things like, how do you give feedback to people to within your team, but also outside of your team? How do you fire people in a DAO, and how do you fire teams? How do you talk about compensation in teams, and about like there are all of these, let's say, more awkward topics that are not really that are not really easy to talk about in the day-to-day work, that I think usually you have like an HR department for to handle all of that complicated stuff, right? I think when you're in a DAO, you're going to be left to your own, so to say, right? So if you have a problem, if you, for example, if you're not happy with your compensation, if you're not happy with the performance of someone in your team, you're going to have to figure out how to handle that yourself. And I think it's going to be a very personal process. If you're like a very introvert person, or if you're maybe a bit awkward, which is not a bad thing, but it can be very difficult for you to handle these situations. So I would like to see more, let's say, consensus formed around how do we handle these things? How should we structure these conversations to make it easier for people to raise their hand when they need to.
That's absolutely a great topic, and I would love to dig into that. Like, let's say, like, when you vote for, against, when you vote like for against on a proposal, like, it's really awkward, right? Like, I can, I can do agree vote for any proposal, but it's kind of like I have still a feeling that, like, is it okay to vote for against? Like, if people are like voting against for like over 50% or majority of it, like, I feel fine. But like, I think it's the same topic. Like, like firing people, like how? Because like it's in a sub DAO, right? Like, we cannot like go reach out to like HL, like, team and then tell them like, please, hire someone, something like that. But like we have to manage all of it inside of the team. So like compensation as well, like I think that's a super interesting, an important topic. Thanks for sharing the idea. Like, oh man, I'm so sad that it's already a time. But
same.
Yeah. So yeah, like, till the end, like, I just wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity and being on the podcast. And also, like, in closing, like, can you tell us like where people can find you, and also if there's anything you want to say to audience, like, please.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a great way to end the podcast. So yeah, appreciate you inviting me. I think this was a lot of fun, and as I just learned, we're going to meet each other in Denver, right? For ETH Denver. So
Sure,
that's going to be fun. Yeah. So I guess the main people, the way people can reach me is, I think, on Twitter. I think that's the spot where I hang out the most. It's 0x Deniz, so 0x and then DENIZ. And I think the last thing I wanted to say is that if this conversation resonates, right, or if you're looking into, I don't know, getting into the Web3 space, working for a DAO, if you feel like you're in a position where you can take some risk, the risk I just mentioned, for example, and if you're, I don't know, if you're kind of still not sure, just start talking to people. I think that's the best way to take the next step. It really helped me when I was in a kind of like this discovery phase. Just talk to people, ask them all of the questions that you have. Also tell them about what you're not sure about yet. And this industry generally is like very open and friendly and approachable, and there's really
that is
like
so
this
true
positive sum mindset that I think is really beautiful, and I really hope we can consolidate that for a long time. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, and you're not alone. So if you have any if you have any appetite for this space, then go for it and try to answer your last questions, and then just try to find an opportunity and go for it, because it's going to be a very, very good experience for you, I think.
Yeah, that's totally true. The space is so open, and like everyone is so kind. Even like when I get into the space, like even like I was like I was having zero knowledge about what Ethereum is. Like they helped me really like kindly, and like yeah, the space. Anyway, like I would love to keep this culture as well. And also
Yeah.
thanks again, Dennis. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Clay.
All right.